was the raw comic who became an unlikely father figure.
It's Uncle Bernie.
He lets us laugh at things that we know are funny, even though they may not be PC. It's hilarious.
I'm gonna kill one of them kids.
Escaping a lifetime of hardship, he's emerged as one of America's favorite funny men.
Black people are the funniest people in the world.
I call him the ambassador of goodwill.
And through it all, Bernie Mac never stopped telling it like it is.
You know I ain't lying. I'm telling you like I tell you. You all fine, but you crazy.
Bernie Mac, the original king of comedy, has been so open about his life and his struggles.
Damn.
Fans can't help but wonder if it's all just an act.
Ain't nothing sacred. Cut the camera off.
But the movie and sitcom star has overcome painful and sometimes tragic obstacles that were far from funny. Bernard Jeffrey McCullough was born on the south side of Chicago on October 5th, 1957. His mother, Mary, was a smart, level-headed woman, but she had gotten pregnant after falling for the line of Bernie's father, Jeffrey Harrison, a silver-tongued charmer.
He was a smooth, articulate, real nice dresser. I could see why my mother, probably was attracted to him.
Bernie's parents never married, and his father was rarely around. But Bernie did have a loving extended family that included aunts and uncles, a brother, and several cousins.
We were like brothers and sisters. Everybody knew us as the Mac, the McCulloughs.
Bernie and his family lived in a two-bedroom apartment over a storefront church.
There was a lot of people in this house. At one point, there might have been 10 people in a two-bedroom apartment. That's a lot of people.
The McCulloughs attended services regularly at the church downstairs, where Bernie's grandfather, Thurman, often preached.
My grandfather was a deacon of the church. He was go to work, pray.
Church is very important because we wasn't living in all the best of neighborhoods. A lot of things going on. So that was like foundation.
When Bernie wasn't in church, his grandmother, Lorraine, kept all the kids in line. Big Mama was a strict disciplinarian, and nothing got by her.
My grandmother, she'll let you think you're getting away with something, but you're really not. She would tell us, I'm gonna whip you. I'm gonna get you. We would go all day. And you like, oh, it's bedtime now, no whooping. Soon as you get ready to doze off, here she comes.
My grandmother was one of the strongest individuals in my life. It was not a male. She taught me respect. Respect is the most powerful thing in the world, especially when you respect yourself. Respect is bigger than dollars and cents.
Bernie grew up poor, but his mother and grandparents made sure he had a rich outlook on life.
They always taught us to believe in what we wanted to do. I mean, that sticks with you. Don't let anybody put you down. You can do anything you want to do.
In 1964, when he was 6, Bernie found his mother crying in the living room and discovered the power of comedy.
I said, Mom, don't cry. I said, Mom, don't cry. And Bill Cosby came on television and started doing his thing. And my mother broke out laughing. And I said, Mom, that's what I'm going to do. I said, I'm going to be a comedian so you never have to cry again.
Television became a key part of Bernie's childhood. The family sitcoms of the 1960s became a window into an idealized world where fathers and sons got along and laughter solved everything. Bernie's favorite program was The Andy Griffith Show.
I tell you why Andy Griffith is my favorite. Because he was so secure. I love security.
Well, the thing to do when you're feeling sad is to shoot for the good feeling. Do you understand what I mean?
I think so.
Good.
Mikey Mouse!
Television also taught Bernie how to be funny.
You know, they just don't make men like you anymore.
He imitated all the greats. Bill Cosby, Jackie Gleason, Moms Mabley, Flip Wilson, and the star of Sanford and Son, Red Fox. Bernie loved the character of Fred Sanford, and one Sunday, while directing the church's children's choir, the budding comedian gave the congregation a taste of TV's favorite junkman.
He just bust into a Fred Sanford, grabbed his heart in his chest, and he was directing, going back and forth to directing the choir, and I looked over at my grandmother. Oh, if we could get a picture of her face. But, I mean, it was incredible. He got in trouble big time for that, doing Sanford and Son. But it was okay with him, because he's going to do something else.
He always said he was going to be an entertainer. Even when he was a kid, he was going to be an entertainer.
Bernie was just naturally funny. Just let's get that straight.
By the time he entered Chicago Vocational High School, Bernie had made up his mind that comedy would be his ticket to a better life. But his friends weren't so sure.
And at that time, you only had Richard Pryor, Red Fox. He wasn't on the level that it's on now. So it was like, what's the big thing about being a comedian? You know, going around telling jokes.
Bernie wasn't the first in his family to try show business. His brother, Darryl, had a brief brush with fame as a guitarist for the singing group The Chi-Lites.
I admired his style. I admired him from the way he kept himself up, but he was just too selfish and arrogant.
Darryl ultimately left The Chi-Lites, but Bernie was still inspired. Though he didn't think much of Darryl's attitude, 15-year-old Bernie soon began imitating his brother's slick look.
He would make sure he combed his hair, make sure his teeth was okay. You know, just start soaking his nails and like joy. Dishwashing liquid, you know. You got a fingernail file, you know, just taking more interest in things like that.
Bernie's life was on track. Though he wasn't the best student, he had avoided all the pitfalls that claimed many young black men in the inner city. But it was the 1970s, and drugs were everywhere. Bernie wasn't interested, but marijuana was a favorite with some of his peers.
He majored in machine shop, and a lot of the guys in machine shop shot dice. They got high and stuff like that, and he would play the role, but he didn't get high. And one guy set him up, and I think they put something in it, and because he really flipped out.
Bernie's first time smoking marijuana landed him in the emergency room.
I never will forget the look on my mother's face. The doctor said, "Son, you got angel dust all in your system. Your nervous system is shot." I was on medication for 2 years.
Bernie had learned the hard way. He wasn't going to let anything or anyone mess up his life again. But in 1973, as Bernie entered the 11th grade, he was hit with another crisis when cancer took the life of his mother. Bernie was heartbroken, and he faced more tragedy the following year when his brother Darryl died suddenly of a heart attack. Bernie was devastated, but he didn't let his feelings show.
I always looked at Bernie as laughing behind his tears. He was strong. He was tough. He's seen that there's life and there's death.
Bernie had taken hard knocks, but he still had his dream. The 16-year-old kept telling jokes to anyone who would listen, at school, on the street, even while riding the L.
Bernie would just stand up on the L and just crack jokes. I'm like, boy, sit down. You don't know these people. I mean, he would have an audience. He would talk about your mother. He would talk about you. And it would just keep coming. And keep coming. And you just keep laughing.
By Bernie's senior year, he thought he was on his way to living his dream of becoming a comedian. Nothing was going to stop him. And then he met Rhonda Gore, an attractive girl at his school. At first, Rhonda was put off by Bernie's appearance.
He was just, I don't know, it was just that he was really skinny, and I was like, But it was when I started talking to him, and I realized, I said, he's really a nice guy. His personality was really just beautiful, you know, and he was very humorous.
Rhonda and I just started hanging out, and I really started liking her. I asked her, so would you be my girlfriend? You know, I was cool there. I thought that was cool. So, I guess, would you be my woman? And she said, yeah, I'll be your woman. I'll be your woman.
The relationship that started in the halls of CVS High School soon heated up. But after graduation, Bernie had to face the consequences of his teenage romance.
My mother called me. She said, Mac, I need to talk to you. I said, what's wrong? She says, Rhonda's pregnant. I said, about who? My father said, I'll blow your head off. I said, what? That's how he talked.
His family was the type, you do the right thing. You know, his grandfather, that's how he was raised. So he was like, well, we're going to get married. And next thing I know, my mother was planning a wedding. We really didn't have much to say about it.
With Rhonda pregnant, Bernie knew what he needed to do. He had to step up to support his family. Comedy would have to wait. At age 20, Bernie Mac was just a few years out of high school, but he already had a wife and a baby on the way. Bernie set aside his dream of becoming a comic. He took a job as a janitor at General Motors, and he and Rhonda moved into a rundown apartment. Mac had already seen plenty of tough times, and when his daughter, Janice, was born, he counted his blessings. Bernie believed if his family was all right, the rest would work itself out.
He wanted to be a comedian, but he really wasn't working towards it. He was just working, you know, for the family, make sure we were okay and everything.
After 5 long years at General Motors, Bernie was laid off due to company downsizing. He began working a series of odd jobs, including driving a moving truck and managing a fast food restaurant. Bernie also helped kids in the neighborhood as the athletic director of the local community center.
Coached a lot of the little boys' teams and things like that. Whatever job he could do to bring in some money for his family, that's what he did.
I didn't have steady work, you know, but I never was ashamed about taking work.
That's one thing I really looked up to him for, because a lot of men won't do it. They think things are beneath him, but he never did.
Bernie also started doing comedy again. Stand-up clubs were becoming hot date spots in the 1980s, and by 1984, Mac was ready to test his jokes at the local venues.
There was a club called Zany's, another one called The Funny Firm, Who's on First.
So are you all ready for a show?
They were predominantly white audiences, and he wasn't received as well in the early 80s because that whole improv brick wall guy with a sport coat and a tie on style was really coming into its own, and he was not that thing.
You couldn't curse. You couldn't tell ethnic jokes. You couldn't tell sex jokes.
A couple of times he couldn't even get up. You know, he didn't even get on because it was so crowded. So he would just go back the next weekend.
I wasn't bitter. I was just determined. I said, I ain't gonna let him beat me. I ain't gonna let him play me.
For the next few years, Bernie polished up his act. He learned how to tell a joke in front of a brick wall. But just as his dream was coming true, the 28-year-old was hit with more bad news. Bernie's beloved grandmother, a diabetic, was told that she would have to have part of her leg amputated.
They had to cut from like the knee below. And once that happened, he said, Rhonda, Grandma's not gonna live through that. He said, because she was too independent, you know, to have her limb taken away.
Bernie was right. Big Mama did not survive the surgery. The shock of her passing was compounded by the death of Bernie's grandfather the following year. At the funeral, Bernie stood up and did what he did best. He paid his respects by making his family and friends laugh.
Normally when you go to a funeral and you talk about somebody, it's a sad occasion. And Bernie would go and take that same element and he would give people something to laugh at.
I had so much pain and so much sorrow, and I lost so much. My mother, my brother, my grandmother, grandfather. And to be able to laugh through all of that, people used to always say, it ain't funny. Don't be laughing right now. Funerals and stuff, you know, and I would laugh.
Bernie had learned how to be a straight comic, but now at age 29, he was ready to be himself. Doing material that came from his soul was a revelation.
A lot of Bernie's comedy is cultural. It drew upon his, ethnicity and his, his past. And, you don't necessarily have to be an African American to appreciate Bernie.
Like his idols, Red Fox and Richard Pryor, Bernie used the shock value of foul language and off-color stories to give his comedy an edge.
When he does it, I mean, he's awfully funny.